And Mike's going to be telling you how to go hack yourself. Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate it. All right, guys. So it was not my idea to go first. I just got slotted into this. I'm sure, so a little bit about me. Michael Sanders, I've been doing on the defensive side for at least 15 years now. Worked with a lot of really talented folks over the years with regards to on the offensive side. And for starters, everybody raise their hand because most people don't participate until they at least do it once. See, like I can't even get you guys to do it when I say everybody. All right, so who's on the offensive side in here? I'm assuming most, which obviously I'm not supposed to be assuming anything. And then how about on the defensive side? Okay, all right, good smattering. So the biggest thing that we're talking about today, or what I'm talking about, and I'm sure a number of you signed up for the sole purpose of the world famous Brian Contos. He had a previous engagement, so I'm taking over. But the idea here is that everything is broken. You guys all know it, especially those that work on the defensive side. I'm sure you complain to your bosses all the time. Those of you that work on the offensive side, you know it because you're smarter than the rest of us. The idea here is, I mean, again, we had trouble turning on our badges today, right? And then I'm the guy that pushed the don't push button first. Did anybody else do that too? Okay, good. All right, I'm not alone. Then you can just reset it. But the idea here is that we assume a lot of things, both in everyday life, but more importantly in the world of security. One of the things that gets us into trouble, and again, you know, assumption makes an ass out of you and umption. But the idea is that we assume that all these technologies and all these defensive things that we put into place are actually working the way that the vendor told us, which is great, and there are a ton of great products out there that do a lot of fantastic things. We were just at RSA this year, and I think there were 604 different vendors on the show floor. I think last year 1,300 different startups got Series A funding. Retarded number of technologies out there. Randomly, the reason they got funding is every last one of them works. Now, does it work to solve your exact problem? Does it work in your exact environment? We're not always positive. And then the next thing is that we go out and we buy these technologies, and then we're going to assume that we put them in right, and then they're actually configured right. Paid a fancy consultant comes in, then he leaves, and then after that, how do we actually know these different things? And then, you know, the next thing with regards to security is that we're assuming that all of the people that work for us are doing the right things. They're actually going through, doing their job. They're analyzing. We're handling events. We're being able to respond to these incidents, and that's not always the case because we need data in order to respond to those incidents. And then if all that's working perfectly correct, we're assuming that it never changes. You know, doing configuration reviews, we typically do them once a year. Your pen testing, whether it's quarterly or yearly, you know, you go through these different exercises, but that's a spot in time. By the time you finish even printing out the report from your yearly pen test, most likely somebody went through a change window in that last week, and you've got something else going on. And then what's worse is even after we do those reports and we find all these great findings and we say, hey, go fix these, you know, a quarter later, a year later, most likely those problems haven't been fixed yet. Again, going back to people actually doing their jobs and actually improving security. So the big thing that I want to get across, and I'm going to try to get it across as quickly as possible in the beginning of the talk, and then I'll show some boring stuff, but is giving you guys some data points that you can go back with and say, hey, there are things that are broken. We actually need to keep investing in our security program. We need to be testing these things out. We need to actually go in and fix these things. And that's the idea behind what's called security instrumentation, and that's what I'm talking about today. So going back to that concept of a lot has to go right for security to work. It's not as simple as plugging in the box and turning it on and having some people to monitor that box. That doesn't always work. So when we talk about the various stages, and this is kind of the process that I like to take with regards to making security actually work, is that we got to have the product actually work. So we have to have a defense in line, and we have to actually be blocking something. Whether it's as simple as a single network firewall or a single endpoint agent. Most organizations have a lot more than that. Most of the things you're going to run into are going to be a lot more complicated than that, but at the end of the day, it's got to be in place. And the second thing is it's got to do something, right? Those 604 other vendors that were at RSA this year, they actually need to throw up some kind of alert. Now then, once that occurs, the product itself is working. That doesn't mean that your security organization can do anything with it. The rest of that string is what we like to focus on, what I like to talk about is, hey, I blocked passed or failed. And remember, we don't block everything, right? We have to let Susan in accounting get to Facebook. That's just the world that we live in, and so a lot of stuff gets through all of our defenses. The idea, though, is once it does get through our defense, we have to alert. And 100% of attacks, once they're in the environment, unless we alert on them, we can't do anything with them. So the idea here is that once we get that alert, it's got to start bouncing through our network to get to somebody to actually do something with it. So we've got to either block or not block, then we've got to alert on it, then we've got to get it over into some log aggregation somewhere. Typically you've got a SIM or you've got some other kind of central repository that you're working with. And then more importantly, once it gets there, somebody has to see it. That last step of actually seeing it is usually the really, really hard part. Because what typically happens is we have a ton of noise. When we talk about, normal organizations, and people are nodding their heads, and hopefully we're on the same page here, but, we're talking tens of thousands of events per second. Nobody in the world is looking at every single event. We're relying on some other technology to tell us this event matters. Go look at this event. So there's a couple of things, and these are the statistics to write down, take to your bosses, ask for more money. When we've done testing out there in the world with a number of different clients all over the scope of sizes and things of that nature, the big thing is that we're not blocking hardly anything. 15 to 25% is our national average on what we see people actually blocking with regards to real attacks. That is an astronomically low number. Again, acceptable if we're investigating those other 75%. On the blocking side, and so who here only logs blocks? And who here logs everything? And who here only logs allows? Those are the really cool people. So the idea is, on this blocking side, we're still not even sending those to a notable event. So you actually block an attacker, but you just go, good enough, I blocked it, I don't care. Typically, if you're blocking something, they don't stop at one attack. You've got to look at all the rest. So if you've got something, it needs to get bubbled up. The next big problem are when we're not blocking something. When we're not blocking something, only about 25 to 45% of those not blocks, those alloweds, are making it into some kind of log aggregation. Again, some of these numbers are better than others, but not good. This is the one that kills everybody. I walk into massive organizations on a regular basis that have zero correlation events firing. They have band-aided it with all kinds of other steps and processes to pretend they're looking at something like, oh, I'm just going to investigate every single one of my FireEye alerts, and we're going to call that our security program. Or I'm going to look at various different endpoint alerts. If it's high, I'll go investigate that. It's too late at that point. If you're not actually using any of the tools to actually get data, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So ultimately, we spend a bunch of money, we spend a bunch of time. You guys are usually the time, it's usually your boss's money, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're effective. And the biggest problem is, again, we think stuff is working the way it's working, but we don't know. And that's what you guys are here for, and that's what you guys are learning about this weekend, is how to start testing some of that stuff out and how to start improving on security. So those statistics were great. That comes from the company I work for. We come out with a security effectiveness report. You can download it if you want. Take that to your bosses. Say, hey, I need more money. This is what I personally have worked on. So these are two Fortune 50 companies, right? I think that's the cutoff line is around $46 billion in revenue a year to make it that high up the list. One's a healthcare company, so this is all your private information. Does anybody not go to the doctor? Because there are some paranoid folks that don't. But so anyway, think of the Anthem breaches, think of all those great beaches. The other one, this is actually a security vendor. So this is one of the ones that we rely on to actually protect us. Terrible, terrible statistics here. On my security vendor, they blocked about 45% of the attacks that we ran in that scenario. And when we're talking about attacks, we're talking about running the entire breadth of the kill chain, right? All the way from reconnaissance to exploitation. And the idea is that if you're not testing every step, then somewhere along the way, you're gonna get hosed. 75% of attacks not even going into ArcSight, and then absolutely zero data coming out of ArcSight. And this is another one of those organizations where they've got a Band-Aid. They say, oh, well, we actually use this other console, and anything that shows up on it, we go investigate. Why do you have a $50 million implementation of ArcSight then? That's stupid. throw that away, go get something, and they actually did. They threw away ArcSight. They just switched to Splunk. You know, the idea is if your technology is not working, replace it. Spend that money on people, processes, new technologies. Determine what works and what doesn't work, and that's what instrumentation is about. This one, I just finished up with this healthcare company. Really phenomenal. They actually blocked more than half of the attacks. That's an outrageously high percentage. Really, really proud of these guys. And then more importantly, 98% made it into Splunk. Fantastic, kudos to them. 8% correlation. Absolutely logging all the data, but not doing anything with it. This is a common theme that we see over and over again. And, you know, again, national averages, this is what we're pulling in. This is what we're kind of seeing with regards to what's getting into to SIMs and what's being correlated and what's not being correlated. And again, it's super, super low numbers. From the 0 to 10% is what I've personally worked on. We've had some higher ones. We've had some people that have some pretty talented folks. But the issue is that a lot of these technologies, they all work, but we're not making them work, and this is kind of the issue. Picking on a couple different security vendors and how this person had stuff deployed. So when we go through and we talk about security vendors, we don't like to beat up on any particular security vendor saying, hey, your product doesn't work. That's not usually the case. The case is that we didn't configure it for our environment in order to do what we want it to actually do. And so that's really the problem here. The big problem is that we have all these investments, we've done all this stuff, we've invested in these products, but we're not using them right. That healthcare company, $12 million worth of FireEye in there, and it's all in tap mode sending TCP resets. Fantastic security, right? So the idea is not a single thing is blocked by FireEye, but it's actually had a really high detection rate. They just didn't know it. And they're internally fighting. Two teams, one team wants their old tipping point. That's a whole nother conversation. And then one team wants a FireEye, and the FireEye team lost, even though their CISO goes, hey, this is what we're gonna do. So how do we solve the problem? That's the problem. Take those statistics, go get more money so that you guys can have better careers and vacations and things of that nature. So instrumentation is the concept of testing all this stuff out live in the real time, in the real environment. Again, I work for a company that does it. I think we do it great, but don't worry about me. There's a ton of vendors that do this, and there's a ton of different open platforms that also do this. So do investigate and see how this stuff works for you. So ultimately, there's red team automation tools out there. There's various different, like even MITRE has a platform in order to run this stuff. But the idea is that you need to test out the security. So some of the ones that I like to point out of why you need instrumentation and why you should do instrumentation is to validate exactly what you have in the environment and prescriptively tune this stuff, right? I just showed you that SIMs are completely broken. There's only one way to fix that, and that's to actually analyze what's coming in your environment. The biggest difference is that while you may have 4 of the same technologies as another organization, probably not the same configuration. So what you're gonna see is gonna be different than what they're gonna see, and it's really hard to share that information, right? Even when you talk about like Splunk user groups and stuff like that, tons of great data and information sharing, but really you're sharing the process. You're not sharing the actual signatures because it's different in your environment. The other big thing is we can actually know that what we did is working. So number 2 here, configuration assurance. So actually validating that what you actually put in is actually protecting your organization or even yourselves, right? Knowing that your configuration is working and actually saving you from attacks, you only know if you test and do these attacks. Another big one is being able to manage by exception than actually going out there and doing that. So it's great for us to be able to run these individual attacks, and those that are on red teams, you go out and you set up these different attack scenarios, you run through these things, you give that report back to somebody, and they go, okay, we'll go fix it. And then they think they fixed it, but unless they come back to you to rerun that attack, then they don't actually know that they fixed it. And so that's kind of one of the problems that we see a lot of. And what a lot of red teamers waste their time on is they go, hey, I broke something, go fix it. And they go, okay, we fixed it. And you go, no, you didn't fix it, it's still broken. They say they fixed it, they bother you again. And so you're running the same thing 3 and 4 times, and they're just burning through cycles when you could be coming out with better attacks and better ways to test the technologies that are in the organization. And then the biggest thing is like segmentation, confirming some of this stuff. So using these tools to start bouncing back and forth in the different segments inside the network and being able to test out the security, really, really powerful to be able to automate this and start rapidly doing this. And then one of the biggest ones, and this is what I just went through at this healthcare organization, Number 5, and this is where I'm stopping on this list because you guys can read. I don't need to do that job for you. But retiring old stuff. So the terrible joke that one of my sales guys likes to make is when we talk about defense in depth, we had somebody go like, oh, don't you mean expense in depth? We spend a lot of money on duplicate tools in the same thing and the same protection, right? A lot of folks get wrapped around the axle on one particular attack vector and really focusing on protecting that, but the front door is wide open for data exfiltration or whatever else. So the big thing here is being able to see what's working, what's not, retire what's not working, just throw it away. Put in something that actually works. When we look at like, some of the classic AV vendors, whether it's a yellow box or a red box, your percent efficacy rate is like so low compared to a newer technology or something like that. But everybody's afraid to change. Like, how do I know if this new tool is going to be able to replace my old tool? Test it. That's what you guys are here for, and that's what you guys can do. So that's the idea, is to be able to test all this stuff out and get value back into the organization. Now, I am going to show you how we do it, just so I can run through some attack scenarios and talk about how you can tune some tools and how you can do that feedback loop. But again, I want you guys to think that there's plenty of open source products out there that you can start testing with today. There's plenty of other commercial vendors that compete with me. Have a nice day testing them. They all suck. So the idea is there's usually, and this is a typical architecture of what security instrumentation might look like. You're going to have a manager. This is where you're going to like plan, do all your attacks. You're going to import all your different PCAPs or various different attacks, your nasty artifacts that you went out and downloaded off malware traffic analysis. All the stuff that you're not supposed to introduce into the environment, you're going to go put it inside the environment. And then the idea is you're going to have something that's going to be doing the attacks. And those things are going to get thrown into your various different network. And this is where everything starts to get fun, especially on the red team side of the house. So the idea is once you get these various different, sensor attackers, actors, whatever you want to call them, all the different platforms have different names, but the architecture works the same. Each one of these things can take on any role, whether it's attacker or victim. So you can start placing attackers outside the network, inside the network, in your server zones, all that various different stuff. And then you no longer have to go through rules of engagement. You no longer have to go through setting up victim machines. You don't have to fire up Kali on your box. You can start modeling this stuff and running that not just across one segment, but in your entire organization to test out and see that stuff is working the way that your boss thinks it's working. One of the most powerful things that we see on a day-to-day basis is somebody at the top spent millions of dollars on a particular technology and goes, oh yeah, absolutely, if you try to run credit card data out the front door, we're going to block it. Cool, I just tunneled it over ICMP because one of your engineers needed to test something, and all your data is gone. I don't know what to tell you. And so the idea is being able to put these anywhere and being able to test across the entire organization versus that singular testing. So a lot of what we see when we're talking about manual testing, the stuff that you guys might do today, is very pointed, right? Like, I'm going to focus on one asset, I'm going to tip over that one asset, and yay, I did it, here's your report, go fix it. The idea here with instrumentation is seeing the technologies and making sure that they work the way that you think they work. And so, quick show of hands, I know you guys hate raising your hands, but how many are dealing with this assumption stuff? How many really have no idea any of their controls are working? Like, who hasn't tested a single control in a while? And then who's tested some but not all, right? Like, you've downloaded some malware maybe on a VM or something like that. And then who's tested everything? Okay, so when we did this online, when we do webinars and stuff, we got 2% of people that are just lying through their teeth. But for the most part, we test some but not all. And that's really kind of the big difference, is that we're going through this process and we're testing some technologies, but we're not testing every technology. And the idea is that we actually need to test every technology. You can't just trust those vendors. You can't assume that the configuration's right. And you certainly can't assume that all of your people and processes are working on the back end. So what does this look like? How does this kind of concept work? And who here has played with any instrumentation platforms? Anybody? Some like RTA or anything like that? Okay. So what this looks like, and I'm just going to run through an attack here. So this is just a simple, normal, ordinary attack of a user clicked on the wrong thing. And I want to see how my environment's going to respond when this happens. So what I've done is I'm going to take, and this is going to start running through here, is we're going through and we're finding a what we call a sequence. And so what this looks like, and we're going to have some trouble with our resolution, so I'm going to have to explain it. So ultimately what we're doing is we've got malware activity that we're going to launch. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through, we're going to get infected because we clicked on the wrong thing. After we get infected, we're going to do some C2 beaconing. Then we're going to download Bottrack, get the Trojan on there, take over the machine, control it. Then we're going to start with lateral movement and reconnaissance. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over, we're going to hit a Microsoft SQL server, we're going to dump some password hashes, we're going to turn off Windows Firewall, we're going to jump over and we're going to get on top of that machine. And then last but not least, that data exfiltration is what we're going to do last. Again, sorry about the resolution, so you're just going to have to bear with me. But ultimately what's happening here is we're saying, hey, I want to go between this desktop user, I want to get infected, and I want to get infected from the internet. And so that idea of those actors taking on those different roles as you go through this is that concept, right? So when you stand up these machines and you start infecting yourself across the network, it's just those individual actors attacking each other as opposed to an actual asset. So you're not going to tip over anything. If you were on like SCADA systems, you had ICSs or something like that, you can't break that stuff. But what you can do is you can put something out there to look just like it so that you can test the security controls that are going to protect those systems. So the idea here is we're going to kick this off and we're going to launch this attack, and those attackers are going to use each different role. So the desktop's going to be the victim to begin with. Then after it gets infected, then that desktop is going to turn around and it's going to attack that server. So we're going to be able to change those roles just like you would in a real case scenario. This is what all the other vendors are trying to do. That's exactly what we do. This is what it's going to look like. And so the idea here is that we're going to run through, and you see our kill chain up here, Lockheed Martin kill chain going through reconnaissance all the way through activity on host. And we're going to hit each one of these different steps. So we're going to go through that process. We're actually going to be running those real attacks across the wire so that we can see how the tool behaves, right? If you start doing something that's not real, you're not giving those investments. So like, you know, Palo Alto's R&D, I have no idea how many millions they spend a year. But you're not giving them a chance to operate unless you're running the real attack, right? So you have to run real nasty stuff, and that's why typically you would have to go through such aggressive rules of engagement and standing up victim machines, whereas this way, this concept of instrumentation, which again, there's a number out there that you can look at, and we can go through some of them. But the idea is that we're going to run through this stuff. Now then, once we run through it, we're going to have that pass-fail of did it get through, did it not get through, but then more importantly, what happened after I ran it? Did I get some alerts? Did I get some of that data? And so what this is showing is I am hooking back in, and this is the fundamental part of instrumentation versus just breach and attack stuff, right? So if I want to just knock over an asset and hand you a report, I'm not giving you any information to protect yourself, right? I'm saying, hey, you've got a problem. Go fix it. I'm not going to help you fix it. Instrumentation is the concept of you guys working both from a red and blue teaming, that purple teaming aspect where we're all best friends, to work together to actually start solving the problem. And the way we do that is by getting that data back out of the systems, seeing what we triggered, and then going in and fixing that. In this case, I'm hitting into QRadar and Splunk, and I'm looking at that various different data so that I can decide exactly what's going on. And in this scenario, and I'm ultimately I can see that I'm getting in causal problems here, but what this is telling me is it doesn't match any rules. So the issue is again, it's not bubbling up. Nobody's investigating it. I'm alerting on all that stuff, but I'm not investigating. Whereas here, I can see ones that aren't matching the rules, and I'm actually seeing notable events are actually firing, correlation events are firing. So it's really, really important for us to be able to dive in and see what those tools do. And again, everybody does it, not just me. But the concept here is that we need that feedback loop so that we can improve upon security. So this was a simple example. This is some malware, pretty easy to determine exactly what's working, what's not working. We've got emerging threats that are going to pop out and kind of give us that feedback, and then we can start tuning from that point forward. So that's the big question, is how do we tune this stuff? So you can raise your hand for all of them if you want, but I'm just kind of curious, and this is another thing that's really interesting to us. Who here has really a hard time with their firewall configurations? Thinks firewall configurations are easy? Most people think firewall configurations are easy. Endpoint, it's either on or off, right? Anybody else got problems with it? What about IPSs? Like actually tuning those signatures so that you can really block. A little bit tougher, a little bit harder technology. What about SIMs? Anybody do SIM tuning in here? Okay, that guy's my only friend, thanks. So the idea is that what we see across the board is that the harder these technologies get, the more problem we have with tuning them because we're afraid to block stuff. and also they get more complicated, right? Theoretically, next-gen stuff is starting to cause some of this problem. So a lot of these newer technologies that we're running into, whether it's your Palo Altos out there, or your Cylances, or whatever the case may be, they do a lot of really awesome stuff, and their ability to protect us is really huge, but the bells and whistles and knobs that you have to turn to get it to work right is a lot more complicated. And so that's one of the big problems that we're seeing today, is that the technologies can do better. We've got leaps and bounds with regards to protection, but it's a lot more work to get it to actually block and protect us. So legacy stuff out of the box typically works better than new stuff out of the box, and we're going to jump into that when we get into endpoint here in a second. But how do we actually fix this, right? This is a great concept. Okay, we're red teaming, we're testing everything. Great, but how do we bridge that gap, and how do we actually start protecting ourselves? So that's what we call instrumenting. And so I'm just going to use Snort, really easy example. Everybody touched Snort before? Okay. So this one's a great example where what we're going to do is I'm just going to run a basic attack through my environment, super simple network scenario. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to run through here, Angler exploit kit, just run-of-the-mill stuff, nothing fancy. This is all old. Obviously, any good instrumentation platform and all the ones out there, even the open source ones, allow you to pipe in new stuff, right? You need an open content. You need to be able to pull in the latest rig exploit kit or Sigma ransomware, whatever the case may be. You need to be on top of it. So I'm running this between two actors across my network, and I'm going to see that I didn't block it. And so, okay, great. So what I'm going to do, because I didn't block it, I'm going to go in, I'm going to dive in, see what this attack looks like. So I didn't block it, and I didn't detect it. Go in, read up on the attack. This is how mine works versus somebody else's. But you see that I've got emerging threats down here, and I'm telling you exactly, if you do want to detect this is how you detect it. So we're going to go out to emerging threats, read up on it, figure out what I want to do, and then I'm going to put this signature in a Snort. So this is the cool part. This is me being really, really crafty. I'm going to select, and I'm going to hit Command-C to copy that. Then I'm going to go into Snort, and I'm going to use Command-P to paste it. I'm Captain Hacker here. And so, and then I'm going to restart Snort, and then I'm going to run that attack again. So the idea here is that when we're going down these processes, we want to attack, we want to break stuff, we want to get through, but we also do want to have some kind of feedback to our blue team or on that defensive side to actually tune these tools. That's the concept here. So what we're going to do is we're going to just rerun it now that we've got Snort rebooted with the new rule set in it. And then if this was live, I would have to say let's get lucky, but since I recorded this one, the idea here is that I'm running the exact same attack. I'm not blocking it, but now I'm getting an event. I'm actually detecting what I wanted to detect. So that's that concept of instrumentation, right? The idea here is that we can take stuff, we can run these various different attacks, and then more importantly, we can have some output that we can actually use and actually improve upon. The next one I want to look at is dealing with correlation rules, dealing with these problems. Same concept. We're going to run through some attacks, we're going to see how it responds, and then we're going to take that data and we're going to improve upon it. And so here, again, super simple network. I'm just going to run some nasty stuff around. We're going to just do VOTRAC this time. We're going to skip through the rest of that different kill chain process and just hammer on this right quick. So just the download, fire this off, and then once this starts running in the background, what we're going to see is my desktop's going to get infected from the internet, run this guy off, go through the exact same process. We know we're not blocking it, so it's going to get through. And in this scenario, we do have those events. So we've got that data coming back into Splunk, and Splunk saying, oh, yeah, IPS saw it. There's definitely events. But again, 50,000 events a day, or events a second. You know, we're talking Splunk licenses in the gigabits and terabits a day, right? Like, people are capturing tons and tons of data, but being able to do something with it's important. So here's all my different emerging threats that are alerting from Snort. So I see this. And some of these, like possible HTTP 404, okay, great. What does that mean to me? So the idea, though, is that we know that this is bad stuff because we ran it through. That's our decision to test this. So now that we've tested it, we can go into Splunk, create a new correlation search. Again, cut and paste is our friend. We're going to dump in that search string that we pulled back out of our tool that said, hey, you saw all of these exact events when you ran this download. let's now write a rule that says, hey, you've got malware coming across. And then the idea here is that once I write this correlation event, same concept. Run the attack again, validate that I actually improved my security. So I'm actually getting to the point where I'm taking data output and actually pumping this into things like my IPSs, things like my firewall, things like my SIM, so that I'm no longer just saying, hey, we think we're good. We're actually taking away that assumption and actually proving out that we've improved our security. We're actually doing what we're supposed to be doing. And this is how we start improving those statistics that we were talking about. So now what we can see is I've got that malware download because of the data that I put back in there. So those exact things with regards to like the terse alphanumeric execution. Great, now we know what that means. That means that we've got malware coming in the front door. So now when a real attack scenario comes through, these things will trigger and we can actually investigate the problem. So I'm going to look into now some endpoint stuff. So one of the very interesting things that we see is endpoint is a real big problem on testing because you tend to end up blowing up a machine or blowing up your network. And that's where these kind of instrumentation tools can be really helpful. So being able to automate and test out endpoint technologies, really, really cool stuff. So let's take a look at a PowerShell attack and how an instrumentation platform might work in this scenario. So this one, somewhat interesting, but this is just laying the groundwork so that you guys can see like when we really break some stuff. The idea here is that I can actually script out and run anything I want on an endpoint, snapshot it and revert it. So I can do all that automatically. So that whole red team automation concept, very easy to start testing out newer and newer malware. Being able to validate that you're protecting various different things. So in here, resolution's terrible. But what I have is I have entire PowerShell scripting ability to go in and I can actually say, hey, this is exactly what I want to run. I want to see exactly how this is going to respond. And I'm writing out this script. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing just privilege escalation, real simple. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this attack so that I can see exactly how that's working on the endpoint and what kind of alerting I'm getting out of my endpoint technologies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through, I'm going to just say, a quick who am I, get back my current user privileges, run privilege escalation, turn off notifications, and then make sure that I've got system. So again, instrumentation concept, I select what I want to run. I'm going to run who am I, and then I've got my PowerShell for system privileges. Going to execute that on one of my endpoints. I think I'm doing a Windows 7 box here. And then the powerful piece is you can run this across multiple scenarios. Most organizations do not have one configuration on a laptop. You don't have one gold image, as much as we would like it. Typically, you've got various different platforms in your environment. You've got different levels of antivirus. You've got different levels of signatures. It's all kind of a mess. So here I am running as John Doe. So my who am I command. And one of the neat things is when we run it, and you can actually get that output. So what this is saying is it's saying pull back the CLI log because I want to see exactly what happened. And then here, what we'll see is we ran that command, that PowerShell script that we put in there, and then we're getting back system privileges. So the idea is like, okay, great, we were able to run that, but what did our tool see? Remember, that's kind of the idea here, is being able to determine exactly what's working and what's not working. So what we're pulling back here, and this is coming out of Windows Defender, and we're seeing that we ran that script, and we did get alerts. Windows Defender doesn't suck, believe it or not. I think they tried to make it as easy as possible, so it's actually got pretty good default settings. The idea here is that we're getting that feedback loop so that we know what's working, what's not working, and we can start protecting it and defending this stuff. So the other one that I like to run on is looking at different platforms. So this one, I'm going to use Mimikatz. It's fantastic. It gets past almost everything, and then of course you can reiterate. Oh, that's loud. Reiterate the script in order to get past anything. So you just go out to VirusTotal, love it. It's fantastic. So you can just upload yours, see how many you get past, tune it a little bit, change some names, run it again, and you can eventually get to the point where you pass all 47 antivirus vendors out there. So really great attack to demonstrate some of these EDR features like the silences of the world and all that stuff, like, hey, how fantastic are you? So what I'm doing in this scenario is that concept of the breadth of checking our security. So what we're going to do in this environment is I'm going to run Mimikatz, but I'm running it in a bunch of different machines. So I've got Windows Defender, I've got absolutely nothing turned on, I've got Symantec, Silence, and what was my other one? Oh, Malwarebytes. Poor Malwarebytes. Any of these endpoints resonating? Anybody running Silence, Malwarebytes, Symantec? You guys are just Windows Defender only? You're just running nothing? There you go. Yeah, I run a Mac. I'm invincible. So the idea is we can run the same attack across a slew of different scenarios. Again, that red team automation concept, the ability to amplify your workload because you have a tool set out there to be able to run this. So in this scenario, right out the gate, what we can see, Windows Defender actually is pretty good. So we blocked and we got data out of Windows Defender. So it comes back, it says, yep, you definitely ran Mimikatz, you can't do that, so we block it. 100% blocked, plus we logged and alerted on it, so that one actually quite successful. The ones that get a little bit haywire, and of course we had to baseline test, so this is our baseline, so this is running nothing. And we'll get that back. So this is saying, hey, you tried to run Mimikatz, can't do it, have a nice day. And then this one, we're going to pull that CLI log, and all of you guys will recognize this when we pop it up here. I should have my little Kiwi pop up. And then there we've got Mimikatz running through, pulling out my hashes. So I'm just doing hash dumps on the machines and seeing how far I get with each one of these different technologies. So this is my baseline. It works. It's real easy. This one's a great one to run in front of clients. So I was at a financial institution, and Roxy is the best dog ever was his password. Really good one. Roxy's his dog. And he was like, nah, that can't be right. That's not my password. I was like, dude, it's okay. So this one is Malwarebytes. I'm getting diddly out of Malwarebytes. No detection and no protection out of Malwarebytes. Again, I did have some default configuration, so I was cheating a little bit. Silence lets it run right out the gate, right? The default configuration for Silence is run. But we do get fantastic logging to let you know that all your passwords are gone. So, the idea here is being able to go, turn those knobs, actually start protecting these things, and the only way to do it is to actually run the real valid tests in the environment. And then last but not least, and this one was really weird, was Symantec. Symantec blocked it, but didn't alert on it, and so when we called up Symantec and we're like, hey guys, we got a problem here, they're like, oh, no, we just blocked it so fast that it didn't alert, but like, that's complete garbage, it's not real. They just happen to have a flaw where if they drop a PowerShell script, they don't log it. It's like, well, you're not helping the situation here. But the idea is that we want to be able to go through and we want to run these different things so that we can validate and we can decide what's working in our environment, what's not working, and how to fix what's broken is kind of the big piece. Again, those statistics are really glaring statistics to say, hey, these are the problems, nobody's got it right. I haven't been in a single organization, big or small, that has any clue what's going on when you start running the real attacks. It's that concept of the negative. So when we talk about being able to see blocks and being able to see what we know is working, great. So world's most profitable organization. Little chain of retail stores based out of Arkansas, if you guys can figure that one out. I went in there and the guy's like, hey, all my lights are green all day long. I'm blocking when an attack comes in, and nothing I know about is not getting alerted on. So we're good. And they don't believe it. They know they don't believe it. And the issue is that they have no idea where their security controls are. When you build a mom and pop organization into a global juggernaut, a lot of stuff falls through the cracks. I'd say our most efficient clients that I've walked into are newer organizations. You've got much more segmentation, you've got a lot more eyes on security because that's one of the first people they hire nowadays, whereas legacy organizations that run the world, I would say, is anybody really good and doesn't shop at any large organization, doesn't work with large healthcare organization, doesn't have a large insurance company and only does mom and pop stuff? Probably not. So the idea is that we trust in this various different security on a regular basis. I'm the world's worst, by the way. I use only maybe 3 or 4 different passwords across the entire nation. I give out my social security number, my credit card information over the phone in public without thinking about it. Because the problem is it's there. The issue is we do enough work and enough services that organizations have to start protecting and doing a better job. Every single breach that we've read about in the last 6 months, last 6 years even, are easily fixable, right? Target breach. The alarms were going off. Just nobody was looking at them. When you talk about Equifax, when you talk about all these massive organizations, the Anthem breach, you guys have these tools. You have DLP. You have WAFs. You've invested tons, but you're just asleep at the wheel. And so the idea is that we have to go back in. We have to actually test this stuff, and we got to test it regularly. We have to test it on a repeated basis. The thing that I want any of you guys to walk away from is the ability to go to your boss and say, hey, look, it's not just us. Everybody's broken. We have to invest more in actually testing this stuff out on a regular basis. Whether that's with your red teaming and doing wargaming exercises, whether that's working with your blue folks, whether it's using a tool, like security instrumentation. But the concept is to do the process, right? Whether you use a tool to do it or don't do it, the idea is the process. So the last one I'm going to kind of look at here, and this one's kind of interesting, and this is that continuous monitoring concept. And so the idea is, okay, great. We ran a bunch of stuff. We know it's either broken or it's fixed or whatever the case may be. The idea is to get to a known good state. So what you can do is you go out there and you set these things to run in the background. You no longer have to actually do it yourself, right? You don't have to set up that victim machine. You don't have to go through that process. Once you get these nodes out there in the environment, it's real easy to start automating this stuff, running it over and over again, right? That's the entire concept behind in-game's RTA, right, is just red team automation. Just let me do it over and over again. And so what the idea, oops, I wasn't paying attention, is to have this stuff running in the background on a regular basis all over the network. And it's tough to see if we can see red lines here instead of green. So green means good, that means bad. The idea is that when we've got technologies that are working, so let's pick on Palo Alto, for example. Great concept, right? We've got this threat engine or any UTM appliance. We've got these threat engines that run just on the background, fantastic. We're protected from all kinds of malware, all kinds of intrusion. But the problem is that license expires every year. You got to buy the new license. You got to put it in the box. You got to turn it on. You got to make sure it's all working. And then, of course, Palo Alto actually changes on a regular basis. And so that also adds to the problem. The issue is that if all that breaks, your firewall's still going to route traffic. Nobody's going to complain. The servers are up, people are able to access the network, everything's working fine. Just all of a sudden you have this big, massive hole where you previously thought you were protected, you're no longer protected. And it's simply because PO didn't get cut, or it went to the wrong email inbox, or whatever the case may be. So degradation happens very, very rapidly and very frequently. Who here deals with change control windows? Who gets to stay up in the middle of the night? Love it. Yeah, the fun part about that is you have a 5-hour window, you go in, you make the change, your QA list is, are the services up and running? When was the last time your boss goes, hey, you've got 3 hours left in this window, run a slew of attacks and make sure we didn't accidentally screw up a rule? I don't know anybody who does that. And so that's what this concept is about. Instrumentation is about constantly running in the background, automating this stuff so that you'll get an alert when something goes wrong. You make it, go through a change control window, you wake up the next day because you've been sleeping all afternoon, and then boom, you know that something screwed up. You can go back in and fix it. So that's one of the big powerful things about this kind of technology and about this process. It's more about the process than the technology. And the idea here is that we have to test, we have to invest the time and energy to make sure that the tools that we're counting on actually work. Anyways, I'm going to wrap up at this point. Any questions, I'll be happy to. Notorious plug for my organization because they're really big social media people. Feel free to follow us. Check us out on Twitter, YouTube channel, and LinkedIn. But again, the idea here is the rest of your talks are going to be way more interesting. I just wanted to give you those statistics so that you can go back and justify what you're asking for from your bosses. Any questions? All right, I'm going to quietly sneak away.